Well, you know, they tell me it's Halloween, or close to it. It's a full moon in October. We're up at Pinenut Camp, and winter's coming on. So I thought, what a nice time to tell some stories. Crazy, maybe scary stories. What do you say? Are you up for it? This is Clementine. She's my little friend. How you like her? Say hi, Clementine. She says, hi. Ah, there's coyote stories, all kinds of stories. I was thinking about how to start a good monster story anyhow. You all heard about the Ingamoji. I think I told that to you one time in one of these videos. So I think I'll tell you about a swallowing monster. I didn't think we talked to you about that. And, well, before I get into that swallowing monster story, I want to talk to you about a very pertinent story. And I think you should understand that maybe these stories are 8 layers deep. And understanding that, it might help you to contemplate that this thing is speaking maybe in 8 different directions. But it's a simple story, and there's a lot to it, and you could look around and see many things of it even in your world today. But there was a time when the Creator was known kind of as like a silver fox. And he had a friend, a companion he called Coyote. And Silver Fox would go around and he'd plant pine nut trees. And Coyote was trying to imitate Creator, so he'd try planting, and it would end up being like a juniper tree. Really not food at all. You know, same thing with the biscuits. That's how it was. Silver Fox would plant something beautiful, and up would come something they call gamu magotni, or gamu si, or gamu cuida. Beautiful biscuit root. Feeds the people, everything lovely. But then you go out there with those plants on, you find strange relatives that sometimes catch your eye and fool you. It's like a plant that looks like that biscuit root in some way, and it makes you think for just a moment that it is, and it's not. And Coyote planted all of those, while Silver Fox did his thing, you know. And so it went, and one time, you know, Coyote came upon Silver Fox, and Silver Fox had been carefully smoothing these pieces of wood and shaping them and holding them and loving them and moving it in such a good way, you know, and he'd make these little people. And Silver Fox had his people that way. And the people would run around and do things, and it would be fun for him because they'd do things for Silver Fox. And then Coyote tried to imitate that. And, you know, the best he ever got at was his own feces children, because when he took up some sticks and he tried to fashion them, well, they were coarsely made with big sticks and whatnot, and when he turned them all loose, well, they would turn and round, and it was kind of like a Don Quixote story, you know. He got beat up by them and tortured, and it was really, really bad for Coyote. And all these things, you know, were going on. Sit up here. So all this was going on. And this thing came by, and pretty soon everybody noticed everybody was gone. At one point in this story, everybody noticed that everybody was gone. But the story started way, way back before then, because there was a thing they called Heart Eater Monster. And the story of the swallowing monster began with Heart Eater Monster. And this is the Nimapu Dream Lodge story. And what happened was this, and it's a really scary story. You would be in spirit time way before there was any moon or sky or Mother Earth. In spirit time, you'd be walking through the woods kind of like here even. And you might hear a crying thing, you know. And you would run over there, and you would think you found a baby crying, a pitiful thing full of tears and blood, and you would feel so badly. You'd reach down and want to love it and clean it and nurse it and hold it to your chest, but as you did it, you know, it wasn't a baby at all, but that was its disguise. And it would be a monster that could poke a beak into you and suck your heart right out of your chest and leave you dead there wanting for an answer as it ran away laughing. It was its way. And it was called Heart Eater Monster, and in spirit time it was that way. And then later on this continent, and the 7 layers of stories going back some distance, there was a culture for 40,000 years, hunter-gathering people maintaining a balance, because always there was these people trying to civilize. And these civilized would build cities and start farming, and they'd kill that certain area, and there were certain agreements and rules, and people were knocked in the head in mass numbers, but never genocided, just not allowed to take over where they could kill everything. And so these arrangements and these balances were held for thousands of years in the Americas between the civilized and the hunter-gathering people. And in that story, and explaining what it was to be a hunter-gathering people watching these destroyers over here building cities and killing everything with their farming that you'd been making abundant for thousands of years. The children of the people like the Nimapu would say, how come they don't follow a hoop and plant back their mother and now planting back a good way like we do? Instead they squat right there, build their city and kill everything. And she would tell them, well, you see, this is what they would call heart eater in the spirit world. They look like people like that monster, but they're not human beings. Because the human being was a steward of the earth, and none of you are that. So how can you be a human being? These stories I want to tell you are scary. So this heart eater monster, you know, starts to understand itself in a corporate manner and act upon the whole world that way. That's what happened. And everywhere in the world the hoop was destroyed by those who worship grass and cattle over a living Mother Earth. And all their way and all their religions about it. And as the heart eater monster began to accumulate like snow to one another across this place they called Mother Earth at one time, a network of human beings connected by hoops that understood by giveaways who each other were, and stories passed around the world like a living network, like a living web. These hoops connected around the world with the Eskimo on the top of the world, telling stories about white people and yellow people and black people, and about a monster that was coming out of the heart eater. A monster was coming out of the heart eater, just like in the stories of Coyote, a swallowing monster, they said. And yeah, all the little heart eater coming together, tearing out all the mountains and tearing out all these things. And they showed me, as they told these stories to me, the scars of the mountains. I see scars everywhere. Slides, you know, it looks like slides, and sometimes there's a picture in those old slides. And he said that monster tore as it came through, and pretty soon everybody noticed everything was gone. And so it was like Silver Fox down there by the Columbia River where it turns into the Pacific there. Yeah, it was right in there somewhere. And it was Coyote come through there. He said, ah, well, you know, I'm going up there. You know, by the Kuskoskis up there. And it was, Silver Fox said, well, why? He said, well, everybody's been swallowed up by that swallowing monster. Everybody's swallowed up in a swallowing monster. You ever notice that? And Silver Fox said, yeah, so everybody's swallowed in a swallowing monster. So, wow. Well, Coyote said, well, everybody's all I got, so I just know a swallowing monster swallow everybody, and everybody's all I got, and I think I have to go to Kuskoski up there. And Silver Fox says, tell me again why you should go up there. Oh, that's where the swallowing monster went. It went up there to Kuskoski. I should probably go up there, he says, you know, and deal with it. And the story is told many ways, but somehow, maybe sometimes in the story, Spider comes along and Coyote gets a rope spinner in his ass, and he has some crazy ass feces children to help him. And he goes along and goes by Glass Butte, and he makes 7 obsidian knives, and he has them with him. And he keeps going along, and he's got this journey, and he's meeting all this stuff, and he's mounting up some ideas, and he's headed that way, and he finally finds that swallowing monster. Everybody's in that swallowing monster, and he knows it, and the swallowing monster's there. Well, they're up at Kuskoski anyway. And it was around there somewhere that Coyote said to him, why don't you swallow me? And swallowing monster said, no, you're Coyote. Something bad would happen to me if I swallowed you. And Coyote said, no. He said, I'm a tall fellow. Nothing would ever bad happen to you for swallowing me. I just lonely because you see, you swallowed up everybody. You swallowed up everybody anyhow, and I'm lonely out here, and I want to be with everybody in the swallowing monster anyhow because everybody is in there. No, said the swallowing monster, no. I don't believe you're tall fellow. I think you're Coyote, and in fact, I know you are, and you just need to go away. And so I guess Coyote, he walks away, and you know what he did? He used that rope spinner that Spider-Woman gave him up his ass, and his little feces children at that moment was suddenly becoming something a little bit more exciting than that, and he spun himself a little rope, and he was stringing it across somehow, and there was all kinds of ways this could have happened, and I wasn't a witness, and I've heard lots of different reports, you know how it is, and but somewhere in that process, he was out across there, and he was trying to sneak into the monster's mouth as it was sleeping, and sneaking up on him, doing a sneak up dance kind of or something, and the monster, he wakes up and he's like so mad at the coyote trying to trick him that he snarls and he snaps and he bites that coyote, and before he knows it, he swallowed that sucker, and he didn't realize it until it was too late. It was something like that. But anyhow, there he was inside the swallowing monster. So Coyote, he went down there and said hello to everybody in the swallowing monster. Said, "Hey, everybody in the swallowing monster." And everybody in the swallowing monster said, "Hi, Coyote, and now you're a swallowing monster too." He said, "Yeah, I had to come in here because you see everybody was in the swallowing monster." And he said, "Yeah, we're all in here, yeah." And he said, "Well, I got a plan for getting us out of here." He says, "We're going to collapse this swallowing monster by cutting his heart out. But when we do that, we got to find a way to come out his ass or something. We got to find a way." And there was lots of discussions. You know how it would be with those fairies. Oh, my God. Lots of discussions. And anyhow, he couldn't wait for it all, and he starts cutting out the heart. And he's really tough skin holding the heart in place, and he's trying to cut through the skin around the heart and trying to free the heart out of that skin, that bag skin. They broke one of his obsidian knives. He has got 6 or more, and so he keeps cutting away, and that's how it goes for him. And finally, he keeps breaking these knives until he's got one knife left, and he's just got this one little connecting cord. But those real hard cords that hold that heart in place, they're almost like cables of steel. And in the swallowing monster, it's kind of like a cable of steel. And he got just that little obsidian knife, and so he got everybody on a rope, and they're pulling on that heart while he's cutting on it. And he does finally get it popped, and he has just enough of a shard of a knife he can cut them, and they don't have to actually come out as feces children, but they're pretty close. And I don't know, there's some other stories and there's scandal around it, and I don't want to say much because, you know, the Nimapu could hurt you for telling all their stories wrong. And God knows a coyote would have no chance among them because those stories would always be wrong. But it's Halloween, and it's coming on winter time, and there's other stories too. More than the stories of the Nimapu and the Dreamland. But I think those are stories that ought to be considered. But there's these things, you know, that people can't hardly believe in civilized life. You know, I don't think they're up to it. But I've heard stories, you know, like even over by the Odgers Ranch in Nevada, where you're up against there and you can look over there at the Ruby Mountains, and they'd say, "You know what that Mountain Boy Range is all about, Finisia?" I said, "You mean that one over by Eureka?" They said, "Yeah, that one." I said, "Mountain Boy, that's your name in English for Ninibe, the little people. Like me and my Irish, we got what you call little people too." I said, "I know about Mountain Boy." He said, "Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't." There were a couple of witnesses there that'd seen it when they were kids, when they were younger. There were some older guys, really, and some people. And they said that the Ninibe actually came and they watched them open up a hole in the rock of that mountain and usher in a bunch of those sheep. And then close it up again. And as they told me that story, I thought how likely a story from a people who watched the mountain sheep disappear from these people's guns from the 1800s till now. I shook my head listening like I intended and listened to it like that. But then I began to consider it. And I began to consider it because I had a different light than the civilized mind. Like I tell people, the civilized mind might work against you in some of these things. But my experience has shown me that living in the walk in beauty way, it can open your mind and eyes up to things that you could never see before. Like the spirit of a wind blowing through you like a whistle, you make sounds and you're in agreement with Creator in such a way, the flow of that thing can flow through and by you and in you that you don't have any way to access that from a world. It's a culture of death. The way of life is not a part of that. A way of peace and beauty is not a way of war and ugliness. But in going another way and walking in beauty, there's things that open up. Not just in your relationship in the natural world, because everybody that lives out here is going to come through your camp like General George Armstrong Custer when you start eating nothing but the food out here because you don't smell like any human being they ever knew, and suddenly your relationship is like everybody else's relationship and you're fighting coyote over a rat trap, and that's real. And that changes, but beyond that there are other things that are impressive. And not in the imagination of some madness, because it could be. Or some kind of poisoning, because that could happen too. But no, not like that at all. But like an opening in a veil that was already shred. And you just didn't notice the tears in it at one time, and suddenly you come to a place and a way of seeing things. A place like, say, you transcend your world. Let's say somebody able to live a life out here, not having to mitigate for Babylon or feel guilty for anything because their way is of this way, not of that way. And in that way you transcend, you see, your whole world. Eyes above it. And giving you a view of all of your world from there, just in a sociological sort of way. And we've discussed those things. But I'm talking about even something different than that, because those things are like of a physical world, but you would understand in my conversation that long before there was that physical law, that this is red because it resisted only the red, and you become what you resist, and that spiritual law pre-existed a physical law. Action, consequence, all that. All those laws. So in this thing, another law. That would be pre-existing. You see these physical things. So then you must understand that there's a spiritual thing that goes beyond those things. And when you're out here in that walk, and you begin to do that clearing where you're getting rid of a civilized mind. And you're looking at the world that you've lived in and supported you forever, not in a way that needs to mitigate it, because it's the only thing that fed you. And you do more living in this way over a period of time. This is a process that takes maybe some years in it. But eventually you come to a place where, it's not like you're starving for human affection. You just left some people hitchhiking that way up there anyhow. It's not like you poisoned yourself or drugs. It's just a moment of clarity, like I say. And suddenly that rock can crack for you, and something can step out where there had been a spring. Suddenly it opens up like a door. And there's something there. Something that you can't explain in your world. I once heard talk about this in the dream lodges of the Nemapu up around a place, and they hint at it, and I really like a book that some friends of mine wrote. What was the name of that book? The Man That Fell in Love with the Moon. And in there was this notion of mountain, not a mountain. And it wasn't necessarily entirely an invention of that man's mind, but it might be a picture of how that spirit being alive can move about and enter a person's mind. And that might be how that man come upon that idea, or maybe he had some contact with these dream lodges in some way. I don't know the story, how it got into the book. But I know of the idea, long before it was in that book, like the idea of moves. And that eyeball would be opening up where it was just a rock, they said, up there by that place Joseph fought so hard for in northeast Oregon, in that Eagle Cap Mountain. Like mountain wasn't really a mountain at all. And it had been a mountain for a long time until it had opened its eyes and mouth and spoke to certain ones. And people began to understand that their idea and frame of reference for reality wasn't reality at all. And so, I don't know that I have any recommended kind of ideas or stories, but those stories that I could tell you are probably scary enough. Because it is, after all, Halloween and coming winter. And in the wintertime we would tell lots of stories. And I don't know if I need to go on. And it might be that's all I need to say on the matter. But thank you for your attention.